Of all the Rebbeim that I had, there's nobody who left more of a roisham, more of an impression on me than Rav Calman. He was my 11th grade Rebbe in Ner Yisrael. It was the first year I was in Ner Yisrael. He's a 10th grade Rebbe in general. Many times to me it felt like he just spoke to me. I was receptive to every area of greatness of his, and he was great in all areas. Although there are many great people in the world, for me to be receptive to their area of greatness does not always happen. So I wanted to speak about his greatness because unfortunately I didn't get to hear the Levaya. I wasn't at the Levaya. I didn't find out about it till after it happened. We're going to start from the beginning. This is just what my experience has been. This is what my perception. This is just from me. I haven't heard anything from the Levaya again. What always struck me about Rav Calman was actually his nosei be'ol chavero. That's something that stuck out. That's when in regards to what that means is carrying the yoke of your friend. If I had an issue, there was something bothering me, and I would speak to him about it, he was in pain over it, and he took the pain off of my shoulders. He would respond right away. He truly cared, and he had a havana, an understanding of people that is second to none. So I'd like to give you a few examples, and I consider him an Adam Gadol because he empowered the students, at least with me. He gave the feeling, he gave a Talmud a good feeling that they have the ability to do things that ordinarily they would have thought they never had the ability. And to tell you the truth, the year that he was my Rebbe in Ner Yisrael, my mind really opened up that year. And it really felt like there were koichos there that I never knew I had. And unfortunately, it kind of feels like as the departure from him took place, the koichos, it feels like there's no access to them. But let me just start with the stories, because there's a lot of them. So one night in Ner Yisrael, it's the high school. Marv back then, this was in the late 1990s. Marv, I remember it being about 8:45 p.m. Marv finishes at about 9 o'clock p.m. and Bachrim are free to go back to the dorm. And as a high schooler, to end your day at 9 o'clock, it's a long, long day. Very long day. Think about it. You know, public school, not that you could really compare the two. Ends 3 o'clock in the afternoon. More of the Orthodox Jewish schools maybe end at 5 o'clock. Well, in yeshiva, the day ends at 9 o'clock p.m. 9 o'clock. Now, I was coming from a different type of yeshiva, where the day did not end at 9 o'clock. And this was my first year in Ner Yisrael. It was a very, very serious place. And what was amazing is that at 9 o'clock, people actually did not go back to the dorm. They stayed in the Beis Medrash learning with a chavrusa. Now, that's just, it's hard to even comprehend. A person could have an enormous avos haTorah, but at the same time, they need to take a break. So anyways, this was the beginning of the year. And at that point, in my mind, I had a lot of avos haTorah, and I did. But you know, when you're in a place where you kind of see everyone else doing things, it kind of looks like they're doing it better than you, you start to think that, well, maybe I'm not really what I thought I was. And then the problem with that is, in many situations, especially at that young age, a person may start to believe negative things about themselves that isn't really true. But anyways, so it was the beginning of the year, right after Mariv. Everybody's staying in the Beis Medrash to learn, but I'm on my way out. I'm leaving because I used to go jogging every night. I loved listening to music, And I love jogging. There's not a lot of people who love jogging. In fact, to jog every night in the world, that's even considered a discipline. You have to be disciplined to be able to jog every night. There are those who will consider that a great thing to do. But I loved it. So by me, it wasn't a discipline. This is something I got that runner's high, and the music I loved. And probably the people who are learning, maybe they would respond the same way. To me, what they were doing was unbelievable. But I'm sure they loved it. But anyways, I'm leaving the Beis Medrash, and Rav Calman, he calls me over. He says, Simcha. Now, in the yeshivas out in the East Coast, the minhag is to imitate the Rebbe, and it's not a way of making fun of them. But I'm not going to do it, even though it enhances the experience. I'm not going to do it because in many places they don't really understand the minhag, and they're going to take it the wrong way. So he said, Simcha, where are you? Look around you. Simcha, look around you. He looked around me. He said, do you see everybody else in the Beis Medrash? I'm like, yeah, I see everybody learning. And he's like, and do you see that you're leaving the Beis Medrash? I said, yeah, I see that I'm leaving the Beis Medrash. He said, would you say they have a higher level of Ahavas HaTorah than you do? Wouldn't you say that they must love the Torah more than you do? I thought about it. I said, yeah, I guess so. He said, I want you to know that you're wrong. They do not have any more of an Ahavas HaTorah than you do. They don't love the Torah any more than you do. The pshat is, you have different personalities. You need to go jogging. They don't. That was a very empowering, that was first of all, I believe he's right in regards to that. I did need to go jogging, and for him to have that Havana, he had that understanding, he had that insight, to the extent that he actually called me over. He understood, if he didn't say that, he understood the consequences. He knew this is a large place, and I guess he could tell that if he doesn't remind me of that, I might change, and I might not change for the positive. I don't know what all the cheshbonos were, but that was a beautiful thing for a Rebbe to do. That's a Rebbe, that's an expert mechanech, a Rebbe who does that. He's able to, there's a lot of Bochrim in this year. This was the beginning of the year, and for him to be tuned into that is something which I thought was totally amazing. So what we're saying over here is, number one, he had a tremendous Havana in understanding about people. Number two, he truly cared about his Talmidim. And number three, he knew how to raise them. He knew what to say, and he did it. And maybe there's more things you could add to the story, more levels of greatness than just four. But he did it. He called me over, and that's what he said. And who knows how many other things he said to other people to give them chizuk. That's story number one. That's a story of empowerment, building self-esteem. At the very least, maintaining the self-esteem, maintaining that starkness that the Bacher had when they went into the yeshiva, making sure they don't lose it. Realize that, making sure they don't lose it. Let's go on to story number two. I remember I was extremely excited about going to Ner Yisrael. I was coming from a different yeshiva, and it was really my decision to go to Ner Yisrael. Or you could say it was divinely inspired. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the thoughts in my head, whatever it is. There was a lot of work that was done, and I got accepted. And unfortunately, the very first day, I missed the flight. I didn't make it to Baltimore. I missed the flight. So I missed the very first share. I believe it was on a Tuesday night. In those days, they used to start, maybe it's still like this, they start the very first Tuesday night of Elul Zman. So by parents-teacher conferences, I remember, I believe my parents told me, they did, Rav Calman said, he said, in the very beginning, when he missed his flight and he was late, he was upset. But then he got to understand his nature better. And once he understood his nature, he was no longer upset at all. So Rav Calman was a Rebbe, he put things into context. He truly understood what was going on. He got the picture. There's a difference between Ploni missing a flight and Almoni missing a flight. There's a difference between the two. Let's go on to the next thing. A lot of times when a bacher misses shachris, let's say you miss shachris, so it's very common. Shachris, I don't know if there's a point in translating it, but we will. The morning prayer services, it's done early in the morning. And it's a common thing for Bachrim to miss it. It's early in the morning and it's hard to get out of bed. And people miss it. Usually the response is, let's say like, Rebbe, I can't do it. And the Rebbe says, well, if you had a flight this early in the morning, you wouldn't miss your flight. And then, so you see, you really could do it. Well, in my case, I guess, Baruch Hashem, I did miss the flight, so at least I could genuinely say I couldn't do it. But in any case, Mishachris, usually the Rebbe comes over and you get musar. He'll reprimand you. How could you miss Shachris? How could you? Okay, that's very, very common. However, it bothered me that Rebbeim do that, because a lot of times the bacher already feels horrible about the fact they missed Shachris. They didn't want to miss Shachris. I didn't want to miss Shachris. I set my alarm. I was looking forward to going to Shachris. That year we were learning Masechta Brachos. And Masechta Brachos, especially Masechta Brachos, the first tractate of the Talmud, it speaks a lot about the importance of minyan, of davening with the congregation. It speaks a lot about that. And I did not want to miss Shachris, but it happened. It would happen. And again, Rav Calman was tuned in. He would call me over, and he wouldn't give any musar. Actually, he did the opposite. I don't remember the specific words he would say, but it was an upbeat message. It was like, listen, I do remember. What was it? Was listen. It was like, listen, Klal Yisrael also slept in by Matan Torah. Like, so it was something like that. It's like, listen, Klal Yisrael also slept in. You'll pick yourself up again, and you'll come tomorrow. It was like, he understood. If the person feels bad about it, so then giving them musar is only going to make things worse. If they don't feel bad about it, okay, then you give them musar. But somehow, at least with me, I think probably by everyone, but he was tuned in to that frequency. He knew exactly what was going on. He was really an expert mechanech. I felt like he got me. He really understood me more than any other Rebbe I've ever had. And we're going to get more into this now, the next thing. I remember once I was having a difficulty with my roommate. I noticed my roommate doing something that it looked very scary, really. So I spoke to Rav Calman about it. I spoke to Rebbe about it. And it was just amazing how serious he took it and how he immediately did something about it. The pain that I was in, he was in the same. He was able to put himself into my shoes 100%. That's called empathy. And he immediately went to the menahel and took care of it. And this happened more than once. One of the things I found to be amazing is that when I would come home over Bein Hazmanim over the summer, there were times I would call him. And it just amazed me how he made time. I'd call him up in the summertime, and it would always be the Sever Panim Yafos. Oh, Simcha. How, like, it was, and you would think he just had all the time. He would spend so much time I would ask questions. The Torah that he presented was presented in the most geschmacka way I've ever heard in my life and have ever been exposed to in my life, and it remains that way Ada Yom Hazeh, until this very day. Up until that year, all the Torah that I learned came from my Mora in pre-kindergarten. That was when I had him. He explained things in Chumash, explained things in ways that I've never heard before, and many times it was the very opposite of how things were always taught to me. And it was like pearls of wisdom would come out of his mouth by everything. I understood it in a way that I was never able to understand anybody else, and therefore all my questions were addressed to him. Everything. That fighting in the Middle East, I would ask him. I wanted to hear his perspective on everything. History, I wanted to hear from him. Just to give one example, just a quick little Dvar Torah. He said this over in the name of Rav Calman Weinreb Zatzal. Perhaps I have a detail off or two, but he would say, do you really think Yitzchak was such a fool? He didn't figure out this was Yaakov? Is it really possible that Yitzchak was tricked? Do you really think he was tricked? He could tell right away, this is the voice of Yaakov, it's not Esav. And he expanded upon that and made the question much starker than that. But he said, no, Yitzchak understood very well this was Yaakov. The whole thing is, Yitzchak knew from the very beginning. It could very well be that Yaakov is on the higher madrega than Esav. But the one who's going to transmit the Masorah in Klal Yisrael can't be this innocent. He has to be a tough person. He's going to have to be someone who knows how to fight. And he didn't think Yaakov could do that. Yaakov might be on a higher madriga, but Esav has that ability. Once he realized Yaakov was dressed like Esav, and at that moment he realized, wait a minute, Yaakov does have the ability to fight. He does have the ability, that deception, that he could transmit the Masorah. If Yaakov has it, Avad, I'm going to give the bracha to him. That was just like an eye-opening thing. Like wow, that made a lot of sense. And there's so many other, just that year, just all the Divrei Torah was stuff that, Divrei Torah that I've never heard before. It was just the opposite of, many times the very opposite of what I've ever heard. There's so many other examples. That year was the year that we had Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. There was a big race going on in the home runs. Big race. This particular Friday morning, one of them had 56 home runs, the other one had 59. So the Benahel or by Temler, he would speak every Friday morning. He offered his mahalach, he offered his approach. Why are we giving these people cover? But they can take a stick and act like a gorilla better than you or I. But okay, we're all familiar with that approach, those of us that were there. But that night, Rav Calman, once again, he offered a completely different perspective. I don't think he was disagreeing with what the Menahel said, but he was focused on Clinton. And at that time, there was a big scandal going on. And it was being published on the front cover of the newspapers. And the problem was that the words themselves were words that yeshiva bachrim wouldn't even be able to understand. So he was speaking about that, and he called this gentleman, he was saying it's corrupting the minds of even our kindergartners. They're learning words that they don't even... Why are they learning these words? They shouldn't know what these words mean. But he said, but Baruch Hashem for Mark McGuire. Baruch Hashem for Mark McGuire. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. I went to get the Baltimore Sun. And Baruch Hashem, he got another home run. And he was on the front cover of the paper. He's taking our minds off of the scandal, and Baruch Hashem. And besides, he said he gives to charity funds, and he's a wonderful role model for the Umos HaOlam. That's what he spoke about. And there are many, many times he would offer the complete opposite perspective than the Menahel. And it really was quite an experience. It was an amazing experience. The Ner Yisrael experience, it was really through him that I really got to see how each Rebbe was personified Torah, and yet they were so different from each other. I mean, he was the inspiration to really get to notice this, because he really gave it all he got. Torah drew out his personality. It didn't cover up his personality. If someone's not doing it right, Torah ends up covering up the personality. But if they're doing it in the natural way, they're steiging in a normal way, a normal balanced way, the Torah not only hides your personality, it brings it out. Those that were exposed to this, I think, know what I mean. I'll just speak about something else that I just found amazing. It's the frequency, when I say frequency, I mean like radio waves. It's like either he just was really tuned into the person, or somehow this connection, some other way there was this connection. So as people know, many people know that I'm very into the weather and that I love snow. And here I am, I'm in Baltimore, and in Baltimore that year, it's probably like this every year, but Baltimore, by these southern stream storms, always ends up in the 2 to 4 inch area of snow. And it's so frustrating. Because why? Why can't we be in the 6 to 12 inch area? Why can't we be, sometimes there's even higher. Why is it always the 2 to 4 inches of snow? Why? But that's the way it is. You just have to deal with it. Most people couldn't care less. In fact, someone you're kind of crazy. I'm alone on this. Who in the world is thinking like this? That they're sad over the fact that the city, who even notices the city's always in the 2 to 4 inch area, and they're sad. Okay. Now, you have to keep in mind that Rav Calman has made mention that he had a shelig shmuz, but he'll only give it if there's 20 inches of snow on the ground. And I always wanted to hear that shmuz. So this was also part of it. If Baltimore only gets, if we're always in the 2 to 4 inch area, I'm never going to get to hear the shelig shmuz. But it was more than that. I didn't want to be in the 2 to 4 inch area. So there's this amazing story that happened, which I'm not going to say right now, but it was an amazing story involving a Shalka V'Tarya with tefillah, but basically an unexpected snowstorm popped up in Baltimore one night. And unless you had a weather radio, such as me, which had alarms going off notifying you of all the changes which were happening, most people did not know what was happening, but they woke up the next morning and there's heavy snow, and they were forecasting an enormous amount. They were not up to 20 inches yet, but the forecasts were constantly going up. And this was a storm that was supposed to bring flurries at the coast. Nothing for Baltimore, flurries at the coast. And 12 hours before that, clear skies, not even clouds. So this is quite a change. The forecast changed quite a lot in 24 hours. And it was kind of changing while it was happening. So you could tell nobody really knew for sure when this snow was going to stop. But anyways, so at Shachris, after Shachris, I went over to Rav Calman and I said, Rebbe, is Rebbe going to give his Shalig Shmuz today? And I said, it's going to be 12 to 20 inches of snow. Is Rebbe going to give his Shalig Shmuz? He said, 12 to 20 inches in Baltimore? I said, yeah. He's like, let me tell you something. No. This city never gets more than 2 to 4 inches. And I was like, what? Like, it's not just he said it, he was aware of it, but he said it with the same emotion that I always felt. So the question to me was he just, was he also like this? Or was he just making me feel comfortable, like normalizing me? Like I'm not the only one that noticed. I know Baltimore only gets 2 to 4 inches. This time it's going to be different. He didn't give the Shalig Shmuz, but we got a lot of snow. Many years later, I was in a yeshiva up north. It was in Providence, Rhode Island. And this was 4 or 5 years later in the year 2003, President's Day weekend. And word was out that Baltimore was getting clobbered with snow. And there was, for sure, he would have given the Shalig Shmuz. The question is, though, the snow may have started Friday night, but there was not a lot of snow on the ground Friday night. So that was my suffix. I had a doubt. Did he give it? Did he not give it? The storm it stuck around Baltimore for a while. It eventually made it to Providence, Boston. It made it to all the other cities. Baltimore got significantly more because the storm just was parked there for a while. And I heard he gave the Shalig Shmuz. Not only that, people recorded it. I never got a tape. I think it was 45 minutes long, maybe more. But I called him up. I was in Providence. I called him up and I said, I heard Rebbe gave the Shalig Shmuz. He said, yeah. I'm like, but when did Rebbe give it? And he said when. I'm like, but there wasn't that much snow. They were forecasting it. We have to go back a second, actually. The other story, when Baltimore got to pop up 12 to 20 inches, he said he's not giving it. He said, because he'll never give it based on a forecast. Okay. And there was another reason too. He said there has to actually be 20 inches on the ground. In this case, I said, but there wasn't 20 inches yet. They were forecasting. He's like, yeah, but everybody knew there was going to be 20 inches. Okay, fine. I guess things changed. And he said to me, he would love to give me the shmuz. But there's one enormous difficulty. You know what that is? I said, no, what? He said, you know the first city to get snow from any storm system? And I very well know that it's the Baltimore area. Sometimes Washington, D.C., but, areas further south than that, usually the cold air, it's not cold enough for it to be snow. So a lot of these nor'easters, Baltimore's the very first city. He said, yep, that's correct. And do you know the last city? I said, Providence. He said, yep. It's like, if you were in New York, yeah, even Waterbury, I'd give it to you. Okay, so it happened to be, he told me, He wanted me to be learning in Waterbury. But the point is, like, he had a really good sense of humor. And I said, so because I'm in Providence, Rebbe's not going to give it to me. He said, well, I'll give you the basic Yisod. But the shmooze was 45 minutes long, but he did give me the basic Yisod. The basic Yisod had to do with time, and that's another thing that he was very much into. The Yetzer Hara's main way that he distracts us, to keep us away from our minds being on Hashem, is time. We always have to be someplace at a certain time. Snow, unlike rain, snow falls and it stays put. Not only that, we also stay put. By these big storms, the whole city, all the cities shut down. A good 20-inch snow. It shuts down the whole city. We finally have time to sit and contemplate and actually hisbonenus and do tshuva. The psukim themselves speak about snow in reference to tshuva, in reference to purifying us, cleansing us from our averos. Hashem says, I'll take your neshama and I'll make it as white as snow. White represents purity. Nothing is without reason. There's a reason for all this. I've thought of a lot more to say on my own about snow, but that was the basic Yisod. Rav Calman was very real. It felt very real to me. The emotions were very real. He was tuned into also like the Olam HaRuchnius, into time. There was this, things had to be done at a certain time. And I'm not talking about like 10:02 a.m. or 10:08 a.m. I'm talking about the seasons. One time he was teaching a Gemara in Brachos. There's the Gemara about in what way were the earlier generations greater than us? In what way? The Gemara says, well, it wasn't Torah learning because they only learned one Seder of Mishnayos. We learn all six. And it wasn't this. Rather, it was their ability to be moiser nefesh al kiddush Hashem. And the Gemara gave an example. And it was a very strange example. And this was, I don't know what time of year this was, November maybe. And Rav Calman said, if you want to know Pshat in the Gemara, I will only tell you by Parshas Vayakel. That's the time. That's the time to tell you. And now is not the time. It's a very... Okay. I kept in my mind, I'm going to ask him Parshas Vayakel. Parshas Vayakel came. There was some Simcha going on. I think it might have been Shmuel's Bar Mitzvah. There was something going on. And he said, you'll have to ask me next year, Parshas Vayakel, because this year he's just too busy with the family Simcha. Calman spoke about Hashem having a sense of humor. He would tell us Friday night, we'd be at his house, he would say, you know, when I was in yeshiva, Bachram had a sense of humor. You guys are so serious. You're so... I have to tell you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a sense of humor. And he would speak about the Parshios, he would speak about Moshe Rabbeinu's growing up in the house of Paro. All this, everything is just... You can tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a sense of humor. That's also something that we're also humor. Humor is part of Yiddishkeit as well. It's part of our learning. It's part of Torah learning. These are just things that I didn't really get to hear any Rebbe ever talk about. No Rebbe ever even offered a Shelig shmooze. Humor. It's just like, wow. So I felt like I was able to relate to the Mahalchim, the Shalach Manos Mahalach, to the Mishenichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha banner. He felt it should not be taken down in the month of Nisan because the Simcha of Adar actually continues and doesn't peak until Tesvav Nisan. So if a banner is to be up in the month of Adar, Kal v'chomer, there should be a banner in the month of Nisan. And he was real. He said it with seriousness. This one time in the summer, one of the struggles I had is that I got to hear his Torah on about every Yontif. But what about Tisha B'Av? We're not in yeshiva for Tisha B'Av. And I'm sure he has brilliant things to say. So I called him up and I asked him, has Rebbe ever spoken about Tisha B'Av? And of course, he said, yeah. He said, and they're on tape. They've been recorded. So I said, is there a way I can get access to them? He said, well, the tape I really want you to hear is in South America. So that's the one that's really for you. But there's another one which is also good. It's not perfect like the one in South America. And I'll send you that one. So that was like amazing. And at the very, very end of the conversation, he said, but I want you to know there's only a 50% chance that I'm actually going to send it to you. I said, Rebbe, he said, I can't tell you why, that's just the way I am. He said, it's just the way he is. And again, I felt like I'm the same way, and I understood. It was like, I don't know if like he was trying to like if he was doing that out anivos, like humility, like saying, Simcha, you're not the only one that doesn't always follow through. And but whatever, I don't know what the shot is. It's only 50%. I would say he would disclose information.
How about the charger?
I have it.
Or just turn it on.
What? Yeah. I goes there. Disclosing information about oneself, that's humility. He didn't overdo it. He disclosed enough to validate the other person's feelings and to affirm them. It was something very special. Like another example is, there was a time after I already mastered coming to Shachris every single morning, I stopped. I struggled again. I already mastered it, but I struggled. There were times I couldn't get there. And then he shared with me his struggle, which, like, it's like, I don't know, is he making this up? Is he not, like, but it made me feel normal. It validated, it affirmed, it made it feel like I'm normal. Like, he went out of his way. He didn't just say you're normal. Like, he would share with me. Like, he really did the best job you can possibly do on that level. The Yimei Ahava versus the Yimei Sina, that was a major theme of his. Now, This following story is super fascinating. So I remember maybe a month into coming to Ner Yisrael, I go back to my dorm room and everything was confiscated. It's empty. There's nothing there. Nothing. There's a little note on my pillow that said something about I sunk your ship. So I didn't know what to do. So I went to the dorm counselor, Rav Calman, who it was a whole interaction. Apparently, because the room was messy, the things were confiscated. But it wasn't just in order to teach a lesson. It wasn't just like in the future, make sure things are clean. They had even more of a concern than that. It was something similar. What it sounded like was like, this is what he said, we have a thinking or whatever, that if your room is a mess, then your mind is a mess. So they wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I remember the next day, Rav Calman asked me how things are going. I don't know, he didn't always ask me, just that day he asked me. And I told him about that myself. And this is what he said. He said, I want you to know, there's a story they say about Rav Simcha Zatzal. And the Balei Musar loved this story. But he said that Rav Calman, he said he thinks it's terrible. And he always spoke with that passion that it's terrible. And the story goes that with Simcha Zatzal, his son, learned in a yeshiva, and he didn't see his son for many years. And he was traveling through the very same town that his son was learning. So he wanted to check up to see how his son was doing. So he came by to the yeshiva, he went into the son's room, and he saw that everything was clean and neat, and there was a pair of shoes, it was neat right by the bed. And with that, he continued on his way. He never saw his son. And they asked him, why didn't you see your son? Don't you want to see how he's doing? He said, I did. I saw how he's doing. I came into the room. When I saw everything was masudar, everything was clean and organized, I knew that he's doing well. So the Balei Musar, they take that story. And that, how do we know if you're doing well? If clean and masudar, you're doing well. Calman said the Balei Musar loved the story, but he thinks it's terrible. He said, you know why? Because have you ever read about who Rav Simcha Zatzal was? You'll know that by nature, he was a very clean and orderly person by nature. And his son was the same way. So by then, if things were out of place, then there's something wrong. But for people who are not like that by nature, he said it even better, but I don't want to say exactly. Not like that by nature. There's no significance at all to your inner life. The way the room looks, it has no. He said you could be steiging, you could be davening, b'kavana, you could be doing great, and the room is not going to look masudar. There's no connection. So he said, he's like, I'm not telling you to keep a messy room, but keep in mind what I say. That's what he said. So again, it's the affirming, it's that building a self-esteem. And at the very least, making sure that that self-esteem doesn't get destroyed. Chas v'shalom. He was very tuned in to each bacher. I remember many years later, this is already 15 years out of the yeshiva, and 14 years since I was out in Ner Yisrael. I told him that I had a job in special ed. And he was so happy. He said he always knew. He's like, you would be excellent, he said, in special ed. And he always held that way. And he always told me to keep his name on as a reference. But it's not just he touched people up, he confidently knew. Like he was confident about his Havana and about how he understood people. Now here's really something very unique and amazing. So by my chasna, so he was invited to the chasna. He had something else he had to attend in Baltimore. He wasn't able to come. But the day of my chasna, I got a voicemail. And the voicemail said, I got a voicemail from two people, and they were very similar. It could be the beginning of each voicemail said that they have one voicemail for sure said they have a picture of me or the invitation on the refrigerator, so that when the day comes, they'll be looking at it and they will be besimcha. They'll be reminded. By him, I don't know if he had that as well. But the day of the chasna, he called up and he said, I want you to know, I called up my Talmud, Chicago, I think Rabbi Sandberg. I looked into the Kala, and he said a lot of praise about the Kala. And he was mamash mekayim exactly what he taught. In Masechta Brachos, it said the main way to be mesameach l'chassan and Kala is with words. And that's exactly what he did. It was with words. Mamash, at the time that I was a chassan, the very same day. And we all know that Masechta Brachos he loved Masechta Brachos. That was his favorite Masechta. And what was one of the most contagious happy, if you ever want to see contagious happiness, what you have to do, at least for sure back then, is you had to walk into the Beis Medrash maybe a little bit after he gave his Masechta Brachos shir, and you walk in during the time that the Bachrim are doing Chazara on Masechta Brachos. You know, this might already be by the Masechta Bechinas Man, after Pesach. And if you walk in during that time, you'll see him standing by his table, by his stender. He's full of energy. He looks so besimcha as he watches the Bachrim do Chazara on Masechta Brachos. There was one time I called him up and I said, Rebbe, how's Rebbe doing? He said, Baruch Hashem, the Talmidim, the Bachrim are getting very into Masechta Brachos in such a simcha, in such a, I don't remember the exact lashon that he used, but it was, he really, really loved that Masechta. There was a camp he worked at, and originally I believe they agreed upon him teaching Masechta Brachos, but when he found out that he wasn't going to be allowed to teach Masechta Brachos, he didn't come. Like it was something like that. He really loved Masechta Brachos. He also he was famous for his Novi Shir, and he would teach Shmuel Aleph. A theme that I think is consistent is that you get a sense of the metaphysical world, that there's another world out there that runs at a certain frequency which he is tuned into. And of course, anybody who is observing the Torah is tuned into this world. But the feeling, maybe I was just more receptive when it was coming from him. There was more of that feeling. I perceived that more by him than anyone else. And this goes for Shmuel Aleph as well. Shmuel Aleph is, I don't know if it's the only place, but you have a story in Shmuel Aleph about Shaul going to this witch who brings Shmuel up from the dead, and you have like a very real encounter with this other world. Constant theme was we are travelers through time, but time itself remains constant. That means that Elul is the time for tshuva. You could do tshuva any time, but the chances for hatzlacha are better during the time of tshuva. The chances for chayrus, for freedom, is better during the time of Pesach. And he was very tuned in. The chances for tshuva are better during a snowstorm than without a snowstorm. He was very tuned into that. He'll answer the question by Parshas Vayakel. We'll have to wait till Parshas Vayakel. Oh, he's busy this year, Parshas Vayakel. You have to come back to him next year, Parshas Vayakel. This question he'll only answer by Parshas Vayakel. The Gemara, he taught it in November. He'll only give a pshat in it by Parshas Vayakel. The Shelig Shmuz, he'll only give it if there's 20 inches on the ground, and he said it has to be on a Friday night. Granted, some of those conditions got changed, but no, it's a special shmuz, and it's not given every year, and most people never get to hear it. So he has the Torah. The Torah is said at a certain time. One of the most amazing things I find is that you could look up shiurim from all these famous speakers. You could find it online, everything. But with Rav Calman, he could very well have been one of the most famous speakers, but he kept himself private. And he even said, we keep thinking, Ner Yisrael, Mechina Ner Yisrael is the world's best hidden secret. But you won't find any share of his online. You won't find, nobody knows about it. It's like unbelievable. And I'll give the best example of this is in regards to that Tisha B'Av tape that he said he would send me. He said there's a 50% chance, but it was sent. It arrived the day after Tisha B'Av. So I called him up to say thank you. It was a great tape, great shir. And he asked me, when did it arrive? And I said I didn't have it for Tisha B'Av. And he was in so much pain. He's like, I told the mailman to deliver it. It has to be there on Tisha B'Av. But I said, but Rabbi, I got it the day after, but it came before Chatzos. So he said, oh, okay. He wasn't so happy about that either, but the basic yesod in that shir was something that Pasuk says, "Karav l'chol karav asher yikru b'emes." Hashem calls out to all those who call out to Him in truth. Tzidkus or rishus is not the name of the game when coming close to Hashem. It's knowing where you stand. That was what that tape was about. A person could be very far away from Hashem. As long as they know they're far away, Hashem will have a relationship with them. And the tape said it much better. And that's why Tisha B'Av is right in between Shavuos and Elul. Tisha B'Av is to remind us that we're very far away from Hashem. If we didn't have Tisha B'Av, we would think that we're close to Hashem. We just stayed up all night on Shavuos. We're close to Hashem. But if we think we're close to Hashem, we're not close to Hashem. Because if we were close to Hashem, we would have a Beis HaMikdash. As long as we know we're far away from Hashem, then we could have an Elul, Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li. Then we could come close to Hashem. Tisha B'Av is called a Moed because it's a meeting place. It gives us the opportunity to meet Hashem. And that's why B'Shenichnas of Mima'atin B'Simcha, we reduce our Simcha, but there's a Simcha that still exists even in the month of Av, and even seemingly on Tisha B'Av itself. And with that, he explained why every holiday, the physical world is a perfect reflection of that holiday. All of the Yom Tovim, all of the Yomim Noraim fall out during a time of the year that the weather is beautiful. All of the Yom Tovim fall out during the growing season. During the winter season, there's nothing at all. There's no Yom Tovim de'oraisa. There's a Chanukah, because the avoda of the winter is emunas chabalelos. It's emunah. But there's one exception, seemingly. That's Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a time of destruction. Shouldn't Tisha B'Av be in the winter? He said no. Tisha B'Av has to be in between Shavuos and Elul. He was really a powerhouse speaker, tremendous koyach hadibur. And not only that, he made it look attractive. He made public speaking look like this is something I want to do. And if you're not exposed to that, you just assume this is not something I want to do. Like, nobody's supposed to like public speaking. And he also made it look like always having a Devar Torah available no matter what. A person should always have one available. He made that look attractive. He didn't need to prepare. It was just, as he walked up to the shmuz to speak between shalosh, right after shalosh shudis, he would go through, am I going to speak this one, that one, that one? He would decide at the last minute what he's speaking about. Because he had Torah on his fingertips. He had his Sfarim that he loved. But it's not just with public speaking. His communication skills, when you consult him for Eitzah, he was able to give you the Eitzah in such a way that you would be most receptive to it. He would say, well, there's three possibilities. Either A, B, or C. Now the answer is always C or D. But he would go through all the pros and cons of each possibility, and the final answer would be crystal clear. It was just well, you can either stay in Ner Yisrael. Okay, the pro of that is this, the con of that is this. You can go to another yeshiva in America, or you can go to yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And the hadracha there's no reason to doubt any of the hadracha. He had all the variables. It's really a part of it was also active, reflective. It was reflective listening. There was a little bit more than that. When it came to listening to people, he was an excellent listener. An excellent listener. He would say, I'm a speaker, I'm not a listener, but when it came to listening to people and their stories he was an excellent listener. he would reflect back what he heard. Remember, he once said, a su'uda that doesn't have kari bone, a sudas mitzvah that doesn't have kari bone is not a sudas mitzvah. But I think he said you could be yotze with a don olam, or it was either one or the other, or maybe, I don't know what it was. Everybody knows his favorite song was Ana B'Koyach. Another big Maila, this again has to do with he's able to put himself in the other person's shoes, is by the Yom Noraim in Ner Yisrael is absolutely amazing. It's the most inspiring davening. And to newcomers, it's like totally amazing. And despite the fact he's been davening here for a very, very long time, he was able to feel the inspiration that the newcomers have. He was able to remember what life was like before, and when it came time to say Chesiva Chesimatova or Gdantif, he'd be like, it's good davening, isn't it? And like something like that. Like he was able to, he never forgot what life was like before Ner Yisrael. He was either that or he was just very tuned in. Very, very tuned in. He said he never forgets a bacher. He might get them mixed up in years. He doesn't remember who was with who, but he'll never forget a bacher. He would, at the end of the year, he always kept all of our Masechta Bechinas. Masechta Brachos. He said that, I think the thing was that in order for him to come to the Mesiba, I think someone had to get a 100. If one person in this year got a 100, he would come. He would have a l'chaim as well. It was something like that. So he didn't do it every year. There was a time. Things had to be special. This was. So I remember my grade in the Masechta Bechina, and it wasn't 100. It wasn't even anywhere near 100. But there was, again, he was able to do a firm, this means, it was a good grade. He kept the Bechina. I wonder where are all those Bechinas going right now. That's what I wonder. I would love to see it. Rav Calman used to say that when a tzaddik comes to the city, he used to say when Rav Ruderman came to Baltimore, the Baltimore harbor got built up afterwards. The physical is always a reflection of the spiritual. The city itself, before Rav Ruderman came, it was a nothing. After Rav Ruderman came, the city got built up again. Just maybe we can end off with this. There's a chazal somewhere. It goes around whenever gedolim are nifter, that when a person's nifter, all of the midos that they excelled at is now more available to the rest of the world. So I was thinking that if a person wants to be mekabel, person wants to work on Avos HaTorah and to start perhaps with Shmuel Aleph, Sefer Shmuel, that might be more available to the world right now. Or Masechta Brachos. This would be an awesome time to take upon yourself to learn Masechta Brachos. And perhaps, if a person takes upon themselves to learn Masechta Brachos now, they have a higher chance of developing a tremendous ahava for that Masechta than if they would do it a few months from now. Or maybe it's the whole year. Because right now it's available. All of those things, it's available to the world. And I believe those that do that, it then acts as a schus for the neshama of the mace. So I don't know exactly how that whole thing works, but the things that he loved, Masechta Brachos, Shmuel Aleph, trying to have a havana of people, no seba ol chavero, being misamech others through words, affirming others, validating others. Being willing to disclose information about yourself, even if it might be a personal struggle to some extent, if it's for the purpose of affirming the other person, the purpose for their growth. Not to disclose too much, but there's a certain level of anivus in that. And Rebbe, we will miss you.